witness UFO Abduction, Part 2, by Charles Lear. In last week's blog, we wrote about an incident involving Filiberto Cardenas, a Cuban exile living in Hialeah, Florida. Cardenas was reportedly seen by his friend and his friend's wife and daughter to float up in a beam of light into some sort of craft that then flew off. 2 hours later, he was found 16 miles away on his hands and knees in the middle of the road. He was taken to a hospital and tested for radiation. The tests came up negative, but he experienced mysterious symptoms, including an excessive thirst, shaking hands, and a sulfurous body odor. While this case might have been held up as an argument for the reality of the alien abduction phenomenon, it is rarely discussed and is overshadowed by more famous cases, such as that involving Travis Walton. A possible reason for this is that Cardenas and then his wife reported experiences that were similar to those of contactees, who have often been discounted by many in the UFO research community. This case was investigated by South American researcher Dr. Virgilio Sanchez Oseo, a lawyer and South American representative for the Center for UFO Studies and the Mutual UFO Network. He wrote about the case in a 1982 book co-authored with UFO researcher Wendell Stevens, titled UFO Contact from Undersea. Richard Hall of MUFON wrote a summary of Sanchez Oseo's report, and Stevens wrote an overview of the case. According to Stevens, Cardenas underwent 4 hypnotic regressions with Dr. Jose Yedra, a local hypnotherapist. While under hypnosis, Cardenas described being taken aboard a craft by 3 humanoids wearing tight-fitting bluish-white one-piece suits. He was taken to a beach where one of the creatures left the hovering craft and shot a beam out of a flashlight-like device at a rock. The rock opened to reveal a large tunnel or cavern. At this point, craft like the one Cardenas was in flew out, went over the ocean, tilted down, and went into the water. Then the craft carrying Cardenas went into the water, and Cardenas recalled sitting next to a window and seeing the water rush by while not touching the glass. One of the entities spoke to Cardenas in Spanish with a Portuguese or Italian accent that he found hard to understand. The entity, named Chiostro, gave Cardenas a series of revelations and predictions. Chiostro explained that there was a higher energy in the sex organs and that California would sink into the ocean. One of the predictions was that there would be a disastrous end to Egyptian President Anwar Sadat's term of office in 1981. According to Richard Hall's summary, Cardenas would often refuse to go into detail about certain predictions because he was forbidden from doing so. According to Stevens, Cardenas returned to the abduction site several times. Each time he did so, his watch would speed up to where he could hear it whirring. For some time after his visits, he could make the watch speed up by touching it with his right index finger. He was able to demonstrate this for his wife, Iris, and Sanchez Oseo. At the site, Cardenas heard the voices of the entities in his head and would later even hear them when he was not at the site. Cardenas began to ask if he could bring his wife to meet the entities. According to Hall's summary, he was told he could, and on February 21, 1979, Filiberto and Iris boarded a mushroom-shaped craft at 3 p.m. and were returned the next morning. During their time on the craft, they were fully conscious and were able to recall everything afterwards. Iris reported pinching herself to prove she wasn't dreaming. According to Stevens, they saw human-looking entities around 4 feet tall. They had large oblique eyes that were larger than human eyes and came around to the side of the head. They had a straight nose and a small mouth that never moved. At one point, Iris lit a cigarette, and Filiberto admonished her for contaminating the ship's atmosphere. Iris asked one of the creatures if she could touch him, and was allowed to. She found that the material of his uniform was slick in one direction and rough in the other, like going against the scales of a fish. His body felt firm. Filiberto and Iris described an emblem on the white chest area of the entity's uniforms that looked like an X lying down with a serpent rising up from it. This is similar to what Nebraska police officer Herbert Schirmer described seeing during his reported encounter in 1967 with entities that were similar in some ways to those described by the Cardenases. According to Stevens, the creatures inserted a small electronic device behind each of Filiberto's ears. This enabled them to project 3D images in front of him that showed future events. He was told that the only reason he was being shown these events was so that he could get people to believe in his contact experiences and accept the creature's message of universal love.